Good morning. My name is Eric. If you don't know me, you've missed a great blessing in your life, but beyond that, just kidding. I'm privileged to be part of the leadership team at this church and a privilege to be able to bring a portion of the gospel to you today. In my personal devotions lately, and I talked about this in my Sunday school class, I've been following the Revised Common Lectionary. And if you're familiar with that, you know that in that lectionary you read from the book of Psalms every day. And oftentimes you'll read the same psalm for like 4 or 5 days in a row. So it's given me a great appreciation, a deeper appreciation for the book of Psalms and specifically for the beautiful poetry that is in there. So I wanted to start this sermon today by reading to you from Psalm 138. It's not going to be on the screen. I just wanted to read this to you because I think it's a great call to worship for us. It starts in verse 1 by saying, "I give you thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods I sing your praise. I bow down towards your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your steadfast love and your faithfulness. For you have exalted your name and your word above everything. On the day I called, you answered me. You increased my strength of soul. All the kings of the earth shall praise you, O Lord, for they have heard the words of your mouth. They shall sing of the ways of the Lord, for great is the glory of the Lord. For though the Lord is high, he regards the lowly, but the haughty he perceives from far away. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve me against the wrath of my enemies. You stretch out your hand, and your right hand delivers me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your steadfast love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not forsake the work of your hands." Isn't that a beautiful call to worship? I just love that passage. If you love to worship God, and quite frankly, if you're a Christian, I hope you do, because that's what you're going to be doing forever, right? Someday you're going to die, and that's going to be your job, is to worship God for eternity. So I hope you really enjoy worshiping God. I hope you love coming here and singing praises to God, that you enjoy being here with the body of Christ and observing communion and remembering what Christ did for us. And I hope you really enjoy giving back to Christ as we receive an offering, because that part right there is what I'm going to talk about today. Because week 19, I can't believe that we're 19 weeks. I can't believe it's Labor Day, but I can't believe that we're 19 weeks into this path of belief that we've been following. And this week, the subject was giving my resources. Our key idea for this week was I give my resources to fulfill God's purpose. The key question is, how do I best use my resources to serve God and others? Last week, Jeff talked about offering our time to God, and this is a very similar topic to that, because some of the same barriers that we have, I think, in offering our time to God are barriers that we experience in offering our resources or offering our money to God. And that's really what I want to focus on in this sermon. I just want to talk about a few common barriers that we deal with in regards to honoring God by giving our resources to accomplish his purposes. The first barrier that I want to talk about is often the realization that God owns it all. And when I say all, I mean all. So that means all. That means everything. That means everything that I have, my health, my career, anything I accomplish in my life, everything about me is not owned by me, it's owned by God. We talked about this a lot when we did the capital campaign for the block. We talked a lot about the fact that God owns it all. But it's not just something to remember for that campaign. It's not just something to remember until you get done with your financial commitment to the block. It really is something that we should remember daily and act upon daily, that God owns it all. I really felt like I was going to have Julie preach the first half of this sermon, because I'm going to recite 1 Chronicles to you again, a lot of what we read up here. but that's okay. You can stay there. I'll just take it on my own. So okay. I'm going to sing a life song. That would be tragic. Let me tell you, if I did that, that would be a real tragedy. But at any rate, in 1 Chronicles, David affirms this thought in his prayer. The situation is that the leaders of Israel and David are embarking upon building a temple for God. And so in doing so, David says that he not only gave from the resources that he had at his disposal because he's the king and he has a lot of stuff, around. So he not only gave from that, but he gave from his personal wealth as well. And then he turned around after he had done that and he called on the leaders of Israel. And he said, I want you to consecrate yourself. And consecrate is just a spiritual word for set yourself apart. So what David was saying was, I want you to be different. I want you to set yourself apart from the rest of the world. Their response was that they gave to the extreme. As a matter of fact, in verse 8, it says that they all who had precious stones gave to the temple treasury. The people rejoiced and David rejoiced. And here's the prayer that David offered up to God starting in the latter half of 1 Chronicles 29:10. David said, Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of our ancestor Israel, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, are the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. For all that is in the heavens and on the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, Lord. You are exalted as head above all. Riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and it is in your hand to make great and to give strength to all. And now, our God, we give thanks to you and praise your glorious name. And then in verse 14 he says, But who am I? What is my people that we should be able to make this free will offering? For all things come from you, and of your own have we given you. For we're aliens, we're transients before you, as were all our ancestors. Our days on the earth are like a shadow, and there is no hope. O Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand and is all your own. I know, my God, that you search the heart and take pleasure in uprightness. In the uprightness of my heart I have freely offered all these things, and now I have seen your people who are present here offering freely and joyously to you. So David is saying that he realizes that all things come from God, and all they have given, everything that they had given towards this temple was not theirs, but it simply came from the hand of God, the gracious hand of God. David got it. He understood that God owned it all. The question is, do we get it? Do we understand that God owns it all? Do we live our life in a way that reflects that God owns it all? While you're pondering that thought, let me talk about the second possible barrier. Because we can realize that God owns it all, but we also have to realize that God controls it all. You have to realize that God is in the control of it all. David said things like, you rule over all. Who are we that we should be able to make a free will offering? And in your hand are power and might. David is saying that God is in charge. And he's not just saying he's in charge of whatever I have financially. He's saying that he is in charge of everything. I'm going to talk to a couple of couples, hence, possibly for the first time, I'm going to walk up on this stage as I preach. I don't know if I've done that before, maybe once, but not often. I want to talk to a couple of couples today that I think are really going to drive home a couple of points for you. The first is Tim and Shelley Hamilton. Come on up, guys. So, hey, I would never have gotten that applause, guys. You're famous. You guys are famous. So the reason I wanted to talk to Tim and Shelley was that a few years back, some of you know, and some of you are new here probably have not heard this before, but Tim had some serious health issues. And that really, I think, probably if it were me, it certainly would have tried my faith and my trust in God. So I just wanted to, I'm going to talk a little bit to them, and I want you to listen in to kind of what their experience was with that. Tim, how long ago was it that this happened?
It was about 14 years.
14 years. I can't believe it's been that long ago. So tell me what the first sign was. What was the first thing that you experienced physically that you're like, something's not right?
Well, I started to, and Shelley and I talked about this, and I had blocked this out of that I had began to lose my hair. Now, I didn't have a whole lot of hair to lose to begin with, so it was not as, it was kind of subtle. But then once that kind of started, then I just started getting really weak in my extremities and having trouble walking and even, doing things that came natural. I couldn't even lift a bottle of laundry detergent. And everything was just a struggle. Everything that I tried to do physically was just a struggle.
Shelley, can you share with us kind of your fears? I mean, when it really got, where it's like, oh, this is a serious situation. What were some of the fears that you had at that point?
Well, he had, when he got weaker, I mean, he had lost the place where he worked. Delco Remy America had closed, and so he was out of work and had started going back to school for radiation therapy, I believe. And so he was taking classes, and so when he started getting weaker, he couldn't button his shirts or tie his shoes, and I think it really got scary one night when he was going to the bathroom and fell and couldn't even get to the bathroom, and that was when it got to be physically, when he got weaker and where I had to start helping him to the bathroom, and I mean that was very humbling.
And this is not what you signed on for, honestly, when you got married. I mean, you didn't expect this was going to happen, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a serious reality. What about financially? I'm guessing, I mean, Tim, they'd already closed the factory where you worked at that point. That's right. Prior to that?
We had, and we'd only been married 2 or 3 years. Not a financial worry in the world.
Right.
Once I lost my job, Shelley and I looked at our finances maybe for the first time as far as a budget was, and realized at that time that we weren't tithing. We were very close, but we were only giving what I wanted to give. And so Shelley encouraged me, let's start tithing. We're this close. So I truly believe that act of submission was what kept us. We never struggled financially. Yesterday, when we were going over again, some of the things we wanted to talk about, we couldn't think of one time that we struggled financially. When, for all intents and purposes, our lives as we knew it had fallen apart.
Yeah. For either one of you, was there a moment that you can define where you realized you were not going to get yourself out of this?
For me, especially, I always, as we were preparing for this, I kept wanting to say that this was a time when my faith was being strengthened and built. I'm not even sure that I understood what faith was until I had to have faith. God's got to go to extremes to get my attention at times, and he had gotten my attention.
Shelley, was there a time at which you were willing to accept the worst scenario, that Tim would not, that he would die from this, that he would not be? Or was there a time that you just said, God, I don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, we all sat down as a family. The kids were 7th grade, and we tried to be very, they saw all this happening as well, and they were scared, and we were all worried because we didn't know what was happening. And we just sat down and prayed about it, and I said, it was kind of like that as well, that we were prepared for whatever whatever God had in store. And I think it was when he started where he couldn't walk and was in a wheelchair. That's when it was that, and it started getting worse to where he was having trouble breathing because his disease starts in the extremities and works its way in.
Yeah.
And we knew that something had to happen fast.
Yeah.
But at that point, when he was having trouble breathing and talking, I really thought he might not come out of this.
Yeah.
Because we had no idea what was going on.
Yeah. And what was the turnaround? When did you actually see light at the end of the tunnel? You're like, okay, I think this is going to be okay.
Even when Shelley and my parents and were saying we need to go seek different medical attention,
right.
I was so stubborn. Well, I can't
You
leave.
were. I remember that. Yeah.
First time ever that I had been stubborn. But the turnaround for me was when I was in the hospital down in Florida. We had gone to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, and they diagnosed what I had and said that I could recover from it. And then I went to a rehabilitation portion of that hospital and went through physical therapy and things like that. And I was still in a wheelchair at that time and little to no strength in my hands. And I thought, that if Shelley's grandfather would call me almost on a daily basis and talk to me about Jeremiah 29:11, that God had a plan for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the turning point. That was when my faith became a part of me.
Yeah.
And then I knew God would take it.
That's very cool. I appreciate you guys sharing this with us. This is hard. It's hard to relive, but I appreciate you sharing with us. Would you give him a hand? Thank him for doing that. So here's the deal. There was a point at which Tim and Shelley had to realize that there literally was nothing they could do but pray. And we so discount that sometimes and think that's a last resort, it's the minimum, there's got to be something with my hands and my feet that I can do. But they came to the realization that not only does God own it all, but God really does control it all. And for most of us, we won't go through that to come to that realization. I don't want any of us to go through that to come to that realization. But nevertheless, we need to come to that realization that God owns it all and God controls it all. There are a couple other barriers I want to talk about this morning. And Paul, in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, he's talking to the Corinthian church, and basically he's taking up funds for the church in Jerusalem. He's collecting funds from some of the churches that he had established. And the Corinthian church was actually the first church to give to this. And but at some point they quit giving or they didn't finish their gift. And so Paul is sending Titus, along with a couple other people, to finish collecting this gift. And when he does this, when he talks to the church at Corinth, and he, for whatever reason, he couldn't actually come to them and speak to them himself at that point. But when he's talking to them, he said, he was really commending them and saying, hey, because of your willingness to give, being the first one being willing to give, the church at Macedonia, which has no money at all, essentially, it's a really poor church, Paul says they gave even over and above their means. So he's saying, man, you guys are rock stars. Now what I need you to do is to finish giving that gift so that your testimony is valid, not only before the church in Macedonia, but you're known throughout the region as the church that gives. Wouldn't you love to be known throughout the region as the church that gives? That would be very cool. So in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 12, here's what Paul says. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. So there are two main thoughts in this verse. that I want to bring to you. First of all is we need to have the willingness to give. We need to have the willingness, and honestly, if you're writing that in your bulletin, you could write above willingness, eagerness. We need to have the eagerness to give. We should never give to God because we feel guilty, because we somehow think that we can repay Him for what He did for us. We shouldn't do it because somebody told us it was the right thing to do. We should do it because we love God. We should give out of our desire to see God's purpose fulfilled in the world. So we need to have the willingness, the eagerness to give. And along with that, there's a second part to that, because we can be eager to give, but we may not have the means to give. So we need to have the means to give. And that's challenging a lot of times, because we live in a culture where there's a lot of debt from the government down. Everybody's got a lot of debt. Some people have credit card debt, we have a mortgage, we have a car payment, we have a lot of stuff going on. We have a lot of people calling for our resources. So it's challenging. And sometimes those situations are because we didn't realize that God controlled it all, or didn't acknowledge that God controlled it all. And so we decided to make our own decisions about our financial situation, and it didn't turn out, exactly like we wanted it to. So sometimes that's the case. But sometimes we simply don't have the means, and we need to do some rearranging. And so the second couple that I want to talk to today is Jordan and Taylor Bearhope. Come on up, guys. I think you're rated as well as Tim and Shelley on the applause meter. That's just what I'm thinking, So if you don't know Jordan and Taylor, why don't you know Jordan and Taylor? Would be my first question. But secondly, they're Matt and Joe's, you're not, technically, but Matt and Joe's daughter, Taylor, and Jordan kind of married into the circumstance there. So I wanted to bring them up because Jordan used to be in men's group with me, and we kind of walked through this part of their life with them because he talked about it frequently in men's group. And even though I know everything that we say in there is confidential, I'm going to expose it all to the congregation, and so I hope you're okay with that. But no, I think they really have a point to make in regards to barriers that arise in our life. How long have you guys? I'm going to ask you this. How long have you been married?
5 years.
Right? Awesome. Pass the test. Going to be a good afternoon at the Bearhope household. All right. Taylor, tell me, what was your attitude about money when you came into your marriage?
My attitude was that money was my security, I think, and that I just wanted, when we first got married, that's when we pretty much made the most money we've ever made, and I wanted to spend whatever we wanted, but also save as much as possible, because that was where I found my security.
What was yours, Jordan?
Much like everything else in life, I was extremely laid back when it came to
You
money.
didn't care, did you?
Didn't care at all. Didn't care at all. Couldn't tell you to this day within $100 what we have in any of our accounts.
Yeah. So obviously you don't write checks. You don't do any of that stuff, do you? Okay. All right. That's good. I guess my next question is, right now you guys are living in the basement of your in-laws, of your parents' house. Walk me through that from money is my security to I'm going to go live in my parents' house. Because I'm thinking when you got married, this was not your goal, right? To live in your parents' house was not that's what I want to do, right?
Well, to give you any idea of the understanding I had of how the world worked when we first got married, I remember famously telling Taylor, we're 22, 23 years old, we're never going to make less money than we make right now.
Yeah.
That was not true.
But here's the thing. You make less money because you decided.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to make less money? Because nobody does that. Everybody's like, make more.
Well, it's really, it's how we arrived to live with Matt and Joe. is really a longer story than the whole just deciding to. I mean, the short version is we had acquired a lot of debt through school.
Yeah. Both of you went to AU.
Both of us went to AU, which is a private school, and so
Expensive.
you just use your imagination on
Yeah.
that one. But we decided really it took a week. We prayed about it for a week, decided to sell our house. We had good equity in our house, use it to pay off a large portion of our student loans. Thankfully, we had in-laws who were gracious enough to let us come stay there until we find a house. Who knows when that'll be. But really,
Warning for Matt and Joe, who knows when that will be.
But really, it started about 2.5 years ago, after Addie was born, when we really looked at our finances and decided, hey, let's stop being chained down by our debt. Let's make some decisions to help us go forward so that we can do things not just for us, but I think both of us feel that we want to be able to do things for others with our finances. Yeah. Be that donating money to the church or for the block. But it's really a longer story than we probably have time for now, but we really focused on our finances and cutting debt down.
But the seed, and tell me if I'm wrong, Taylor, but the seed of it, I believe, was that you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. You wanted to spend some time with your kids. You didn't want to be working a 40-hour job or 50-hour job or whatever it was. Is that accurate?
Yeah, about a year ago after Waylon was born, I just really felt called to just stop working for a little while. I didn't know how long, but so we had no business doing that financially, though. And people thought we were crazy, and they were scared for us, and we were kind of scared too because, his biweekly income pretty much paid our mortgage. That was, you know what I mean? Like we had no business doing it, but I went back to work for about a month, I think, and I just felt just like sick about it. Like I'm not making the right decision. Yeah. So I just, I think it was in the end of October, after God told me in multiple ways, we finally decided that I was going to stay home, and I did that for 6 months, and we didn't even touch our savings account. We bought Christmas gifts, and we had money for everything, and we gave, and we never missed a bill or anything. So that was the 6 months, I guess, before we then decided to sell our house and get back on track with the paying off debt. Yeah. So
just to give you the other side of this real quick, when we were in men's group, I knew his attitude about money because, he would come in there and he'd be like, Taylor, she really wants to be home with the kids and quit her job. I'm like, hey, whatever you want to do, I'm fine with that. I mean, it was obvious that Taylor was the one that was stressed over the possibilities here, right? He was just like, okay, whatever you want to do. But the thing is that at some point they put the brakes on it. Very rare for 20-something couple to just put the brakes on and say, you know what, I'm not going to live this way. I'm going to do something different than everybody else is doing. And that's really the reason why I wanted them to be up here today and to be able to tell you about this, not because they're perfect, but because I really admired the fact that they made that decision. I didn't make that decision when I was 20-something. Many of you probably didn't when you were 20-something. But they decided to do that, and I think that's really cool. I really appreciate you guys sharing with us today. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, again, here's the deal with that. There are a lot of things that seek control of our life. And we have the option of choosing who controls our life or just allowing control to happen. And your story, if you're in a difficult financial situation, it may not be exactly like what was going on with Taylor and Jordan, but there is hope for you. If you're in difficulties, if you're struggling financially, maybe you're just struggling to get the bills paid, there is hope for you. But that hope begins with who you trust. It begins with who you believe in. It begins with who you want to control, not just the money part of your life, but all of your life. We have a resource for you here. If you would like some financial counseling, we have that option for you. Corey Dickerson, who's sitting up here on my right, Corey is a trained counselor with Dave Ramsey. A lot of you are familiar with Dave Ramsey. I really like what he teaches. And Corey, I had him put in the bulletin his name, phone number, his email in there. I would encourage you to reach out to him if you have issues in this area. If you just need some advice, some help in getting out from under some serious maybe debt in your life, or maybe you're just not happy with the way you spend your money, and you just want to be able to spend your money the way that God wants you to spend it. I would encourage you to hook up with Corey, and he can help you with that. And understand that you're not alone in this. All of us have issues. I can just stop right there, right? All of us have issues. I have issues. I don't know, do you have issues? We all have issues. All of us have issues. Some of us, it's in this area, it's in the financial area. Some of us, it's somewhere else. You know that it's an issue. But we all have issues. So there's no reason for you to feel shame because of that. But there's a lot of reasons for you to be free of it. And that's what we want. We want you to be free of that. So again, I would encourage you to get a hold of Corey. It's confidential. He'll keep the information confidential, but I think you could find some really good help there with that. I'm just going to kind of wrap things up. I really debated about talking about this, and I'm just going to say it. And I told God this morning, I said, you just guide this, and if somebody's offended, they will be. Carol and I, well, that's not true. Carol, my wife, modeled for me, when we were first married, tithing to the church, to Caddis Church. I did not go to church here for the first 2 or 3 years that we were married, not consistently. And so when I decided that I really wanted to dedicate my life to Christ, it was easy for me to get on board with the tithing part because I already had that modeled for me. And I'm going to tell you, there are people in here who have modeled that for me ever since I've known them. We've got some tremendous givers in this room. But if this is an area that you struggle in, and you are a member of this church, you know, if you're a visitor here, I want you to give to the church where you get fed. But if you're a member of this church or you get fed in this church spiritually, I want to challenge you, if you're not where you want to be, if you're not growing in this area of giving, I want to challenge you to do so. So for some people, it may just be giving for the first time. For others, maybe it's being consistent in that. For some, it maybe is trying to reach what a 10% tithe would be. I encourage you to go beyond that. I have people who have mentored me in giving over the years who have gotten Carol and I to a point where we give to organizations that we believe are spreading the gospel beyond this church. But I give my tithe here. I give it here for 2 reasons. I give it because I'm spiritually fed here, and I give it because I believe that this church is doing the work of God. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here. I simply would not be here. So I would encourage you to be generous. I would encourage you to look at your resources and how you can use those resources to accomplish the purposes of God, because everything that we do is about that. It's about accomplishing the purposes of God. Paul said, give from what you have. He didn't say borrow money. He didn't say give what you don't have. He said give from what you have. We said this over and over again in the campaign. It's equal sacrifice, but it's not equal gift. I cannot think of a more perfect time to receive an offering than right now. I want you to have the opportunity to worship God by giving your resources to accomplish His purposes on this earth. Now, before you judge me, I bank online. I give what I get paid. My check goes off to them. So I just sit away and say, wow, I just preached that whole sermon on giving. He gives nothing. What is this about, right? But I want you to have the opportunity to give. And again, not because you heard this sermon, not because you feel guilty by something that I said. I want you to give because of your love for God. That should be the only reason that you give your resources, because of what God has done for you. So let me pray, and we're going to receive an offering. Father, there is no payback here. God, we could never repay you for what you have done in our lives. Couldn't even put a dent in it. But Paul talked about the grace of giving. And it is this grace that we want to extend today to people who are in need of salvation, people who are in need because they've been devastated by life. So we take not what we don't have, we take what we have and we give a portion to you, Father, because we know that in your power, more can be done with what we give than anything else that we could do. And I pray, Father, that as this money is given, not just today, but in the future, that you would be the guide of how it is spent, of how it is used, so that it returns 100-fold what it was to begin with. I thank you and praise you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.